We're just about live. Going live. We are live. Okay, so hi everybody. This is my first live hangout where I have another person instead of me just talking to myself in the middle of an empty room. This is Stephanie from JS Farms 2004, and we have been friends for at least a year now, and we've watched each other's channels. Stephanie's channel is real farming with cattle, and her kids do 4-H, and all of you guys know that what my background is homesteading, where it's kind of more of a subsistence lifestyle where you're just trying to grow your own food. You're not really responsible to customers or anything. You really just wing it and do your own thing, and it may or may not make money, but usually it doesn't. So Stephanie, do you want to give us your background on how you, what is it you do and how you got into it, first off?
Well, I was kind of like you, born into the lifestyle. My family for generations have been farmers. I grew up, my grandfather, he had all of the livestock animals, and he also did, he raised tobacco and things like that. So all of my summers as a kid, we were in the tobacco fields. So, but I just fell in love with it when I was a kid and just never stopped wanting to live this lifestyle. So, and I've always enjoyed it. The only time I have not lived on a farm or done the farming thing is when my husband was stationed in on Camp Pendleton in California for 4 years, and that was an experience. So,
right?
Yeah.
Well, I had the same experience when I went to college. It was the first time I'd been away from the farm and been away from the livestock, and it was an introduction to a lot of lifestyles that were a little bit different, because they were a lot more dependent on money, so much less, you know, I wasn't filling my fridge with what we had grown, and so the idea of spending money on groceries was kind of a new thing for me, and I missed the animals desperately. So so tell us, what is it that you raise? What is your main product that you offer, and why did you get into what livestock you do?
Oh, sorry. Hang on. That always happens. Oh my goodness. With cattle, I've been doing the cattle thing. I got my first cow. I purchased her. I was probably 9 or 10 years old. So I've had, you know, cattle for a long time. They are our main cash crop here on our farm. And we also raise and sell rabbits. We sell eggs. We sell goats. And then this year we have some gilts, and we'll probably sell some of the little pigs. And then we've got a few people that are wanting us to feed them out for them, and they'll pay us to do that. So, and then I have my garden. I usually will can and get what I want for the year, and I know I have what I need, and then I'll sell the extra at the end of the year. So, and all that, you know, it does help pay for everything around here. So, last year, see, we've been on this property this will be our 4th year, and last year was the first year that we made a profit. So it was kind of nice. It's just because of the setting up everything, and we try to keep everything as cheap as possible. Everything is reused and repurposed. We don't own anything new. We make everything, like the animal housing and things like that. So we don't ever buy the new housing and things. So,
well, but, and that's what we found. Even when we were in our little backyard homestead where all we had was 1/10 of an acre, it took 4 years to really understand our season, to understand our soil, to have enough infrastructure in place that it was no longer us running around in circles trying to play catch up. And that's what we have found at our place now too. We've been here 4 years. This is our 5th year. We finally spent enough money that it's paying us back and not. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand, is that when you first come into a place in a situation with either new livestock or no outbuildings or new dirt, your soil, your climate educates you for a few years before you really understand how to manage what you're doing.
That's right. And we moved from probably, it was 45 minutes down the road from whenever my husband got out of the Marine Corps. We stayed in our family's old homestead for probably 4 years, and then we found this place and moved here, and the soils are completely different.
Yeah.
There's a lot more clay in this soil. So learning how to garden here, I've had to do a lot of amendments to the soil. Luckily with our cattle, in the wintertime, we feed them all in the same area, and then we pile it all up for compost, and we compost it down. So we've been adding that in there, and then we've got the rabbit manure and the chicken manure, and just building the soil up, it takes time. So
did you start out with any infrastructure? When you started out, was anything inherited? I know a lot of what we did to experiment with in the beginning was that I inherited a lot of stuff from my dad's farm when they moved into town. And so a four-wheeler or a tractor, these were all things that we inherited, and it kept us from, it kept our operating costs down. Did any of that happen with you where some of it was kind of handed on from somebody else?
not really, but we're friends with carpenters and people like that, and we've gotten all the sheds that we have, except for the one that was here when we purchased the property. They said, hey, this owner, say they're remodeling a house or whatever, the owner wants us to tear this shed up and throw it in the dumpster. So we're like, well, we'll come and take it. We've gotten the lean-to, it's a Morton building out there where we keep Cassidy steer. We disassembled it and reassembled it here, and our chicken shed, and we also have another shed up front that's a plastic one, and the infrastructure, we've either found it, salvaged it, or made it ourselves. So I think the only thing we brought with us was an old two-bottom plow, and that was my great-grandfather's, and we brought that with us, but we had to purchase our tractor. It's a 1971 IH. Luckily, my husband's a mechanic, so he can work on it when it breaks down. But so everything that we have here, we've put in place ourselves, except for the one shed that came with the property, and we're having to fix it now because it's kind of going downhill. We put a new roof on it last year, so this year we're doing the new siding.
So when you got into this, and currently, do you have one of you working off-site to be able to fund this, or did you take out a loan when you first started? If you took out a loan, how much of a loan did you have to take out, or did you bring a chunk of money from some other business you've done? How was it that you were able to afford getting started, or is your husband working off-site?
Yeah, my husband, he works for the local electric cooperative here in the next county over. He does work off the homestead. The only thing we had to get a loan for was the tractor, and it's already paid off, just because they wanted the whole chunk right then, and kind of how that works, but it's paid off now. So everything here, we've just added as we could afford it. We didn't go into a lot of debt. I mean, we have our mortgage, obviously, but everything here we didn't spend hardly anything on to get. So if you're really good at finding free stuff, you can do it. So all of our rabbitry, we bought the screws to put it together. All the boards were either salvaged. I can't tell you how many nails I pulled out of boards for those things. So,
Well, and people wonder why farms look like trash piles that are constantly moving, and it's because it's the only way you can really afford to do it. And there's a reason why it always looks like a trash pile. It's because those are actually your treasure heaps, where you're
That's
like,
right.
I saw that somewhere. I saw that somewhere, and I know I can use it on something. And what you don't use yourself, a lot of times you can sell to somebody else later. Pallets, or lumber, or if you create it from your scrap heap, but then you find you don't use it, a lot of times you can sell your finished product. And so it's kind of embarrassing when you have like friends and family come over because your place looks like a trash heap. And that's one thing that really kind of bothers me about the farming is my treasure is not always somebody else's treasure. It creates something amazing, but
right.
You have so many systems in play that if you don't harvest a lot from somebody else's garbage, you'd have to kind of be a millionaire to be a farmer if you didn't do some salvage.
Right. And I have one designated area in my yard. Well, it's kind of out of sight, but it's where I keep all of the treasures. But the most expensive part, I think, to getting into the farming is the actual purchase of the animals and stock, especially if you're wanting to get into cattle. Now, cattle prices for the last couple of years have been astronomical, which is good if you're in the cattle business, but bad if you want to get into the cattle business. And because last night I was kind of looking at it because I wanted to kind of give people a perspective on what the prices are right now for cattle. The current market, I looked it up. Looked up at the market report, and that was from last Monday. 450 to 500 pound calves, if you're going to go that route and buy some feeder calves and just keep them. They were $1.80 to $1.93 a pound. And if you were going to buy, say, a 500 pound calf, that's, around $965 or so. And in 2014, we sold a group of calves that averaged 450 pounds, and they brought on average 200 or cents a pound.
Yeah.
And in 2015, the last year when we sold our calf crop, they averaged about 400 pounds, and they brought $2.89 a pound. And that fall is when they really started to take a dive, the cattle market has. But the prices, it may seem like a big steep drop off, but the prices are actually coming back to where they're supposed to be. And people complain that they're not making that $2.89 a pound. Well, normal prices are supposed to be around $1.80 to $1.93. So
yeah,
they were living it up there for a couple years. So.
Well, and the thing for me when I think about like real farming versus homesteading is when you're a real farmer and you want to do any kind of breeding, you have got to be so careful to have a good source of feed that is going to put weight on them quickly, but is also going to be inexpensive and locally available, something that somebody else can truck in if you don't have the big equipment to truck it in. Because once if you've never owned a cow, you don't realize how many tons of hay go into that cow to get it to the point where you sell it. And
right.
Even as a homesteader, the cheapest, easiest place to sell something is a baby. And to
right.
sell stock, so you can, sell breeding stock and you can really, really make money. But if you don't have a lot of pasture and you don't have a good source of feed, then you don't really make any money back because it's all about what you're putting into them. Right.
And with the cattle, in different areas of the country, here in Missouri, you get 3 acres per cow. That's kind of what you want to figure on. And that is where the cow, that'll be enough pasture to support 1 cow for the whole grazing season. And, if you get out in Montana or Wyoming, the acres per cow goes up. Even if you go down into Arizona, it's really high. You need a lot of acreage to support cow if you don't want to be feeding them hay or additives or whatever throughout the grazing season.
Yeah.
So
if you're a farmer a cattle farmer, pick your state.
Right.
State carefully.
Well, out in Montana and Wyoming, the ranches out there are gigantic. And they have to be to raise as many cattle as they do. So.
Well, and it has so much growing season, not just the rain. Here, we can have plenty of moisture, but we don't have any grass on our pasture till the 1st of May. because it's so
Oh,
cold.
okay.
And so our growing season and it's kind of sparse at that point. It's not till we get closer to June that we have really lush grass. And so it isn't necessarily about how dry it is. It's about when does the weather warm up enough that the grass can really get a good start on. And then we're done by the end of August, maybe the middle of September. So our season is exceptionally short. So if you don't have haymaking equipment in our area,
it's very short.
It's very, very, very short.
See, we start getting our grass starts growing around 1st of April or so. And I'd say end of September, 1st of October is when, you know, want to take them off the grass and start putting them on the hay and stuff. So,
yeah.
And then for our we have 6 cows we overwinter and 1 pony. And they eat a round bale. If it's mild weather, they'll eat it every 3 days. If it's really cold, it'll last 2 days. So you got to take into consideration.
A round bale is half a ton, isn't it? In our area.
It depends on what size. Depends on what size you get. We get the let's see, I think it's the 5x4, 4x5s. So that's what my dad's baler bales up. And we've never weighed them, so I don't know. And it really depends on the baler. You can wrap that hay up really, really tight, or you can have a really loose bale. So it really depends on the person that bales it up, depending on what the weight's going to be.
Estimate on tonnage? Any kind of like a round ballpark estimate?
I don't know. I didn't write that down. I don't know right off the top of my head. So.
For us, a really good alfalfa bale is going to weigh about 85 pounds. If it's grass hay, it'll weigh under 50 pounds. It'll be really easy to pick up. So for us, if we're feeding our goats through the winter, they go through 2, maybe 3 tons. We only have 3 goats. They're heavy production, so it needs to be somewhat high in protein, not too high or they get sick. But I know that when we were feeding cows, I think my dad had like 4 Angus, and they'd have their calves on him. And I think he went through something like 10 or 12 ton a year. And he had really good pastures, but that's how much he'd go through in a winter. In our area, it's just under $200 a ton for good hay. And so you can see if you were buying the hay, how much it would cost to feed those cows through the winter.
Yeah, and the season really dictates how much the hay is going to cost too. In 2012, we had a drought here in Missouri, and a round bale of hay, it was anywhere from $65 to $85 per bale. Normally, you're gonna get a bale of hay, a big round bale of hay for about $30. So it was more expensive to feed them in 2012 than it was this year.
Wow.
So
that is so different.
It just depends on the hay season.
Yeah. Well, if you have a really wet season and none of your hay gets to dry out, then everything gets moldy or it catches fire once you have it stacked. And so if you have a really dry season, the grass doesn't grow. If you have a really wet season, it never dries thoroughly. And so being a farmer, it's about having the right kind of livestock that can handle those kind of switches. And cows are really, really good at that. They can eat the moldy hay and not die. And that's why they're a little more economical to feed than, say, maybe goats. Goats are a little more sensitive to mold. But we are just about at the end of our chat. So I did want to talk a little bit about how long do you see yourself being able to continue to do this? You have kids now that are helping and your husband's able-bodied. For our situation, we're thinking how can we get systems in place that will allow us to continue doing what we love if we, as we get older and there's less we can physically do ourselves? What is your future perspective of being able to continue to do this?
I'm going to do it as long as I am able-bodied. Now I will, as I get older or whatever and not able to take care of them, I'll probably phase out a lot of the animals, but I'll probably keep the ones that are easier to maintain. With the garden situation, I'll probably have more raised beds so I don't have to bend over and weed vegetables or whatnot. So I will probably just make it to where it's easier as we get older.
I look back
it, so.
at some of the reading, and it used to be if you had lots of sons, they would be there to help with the farm, or you would have a hired hand. My way of looking at it is, if in a perfect world where I was aging and I was still on the farm, I would do my darndest at this stage to make enough income on the farm that I could hire someone as I age to take over more and more of the farm, to definitely cut back, but to have someone that was loving the farming as much as I did, who I could pay and train to come on and do these things, so that I didn't have to leave the farm as I became less able to do the work. In a perfect world, that's what I would work on, is to find some kind of bartering system or some way of making money, or finding someone who cared about it enough to come and be that hired hand. Because that's where farms get lost, is in that skip where you start to get too tired to do it anymore, and there's nobody there to take up that slack who loves it enough to take it in barter, or to take it on a lower wage, or to be willing to not have a mortgage and be able to manage your farm for you in exchange for housing. I think
Right.
with prices for feed and stuff like that now, being really innovative about those kind of solutions is about the only way that you can really support the lifestyle as we age. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with you. I would really love it if one of my kids would like to take over whenever I'm not able to do it anymore. Both kids love living here, so I'm hoping. I kind of see Cassidy being the one that would do it. Caitlin's more of my little primpy girl, but
Yeah.
she's not afraid to get down there in the dirt, and she'll pick up worms, and she's not afraid to get dirty either. But in a perfect world, one of my kids would take it over from me.
Right.
And I would I don't know, it just depends on what happens further on down the road, but that would be my perfect solution, would be one of the kids wants to take it over. So
yeah. Well, and I think the hardest thing to do is to leave your dirt. I know when we moved, that all that work I'd done putting dirt in, then to see somebody put it in as lawn broke my heart. And so there is that. Anytime you leave, you feel like you have stewardship over that land, and it makes it really hard to feel like you're leaving all your worms and all your salamanders and your little garter snakes, and hoping that they don't put grass in and put chemicals in it. So, okay, so we have, your channel is JS Farms 2004. Are there any other links, or do you have an Etsy store or anything else you want to talk about before we wrap up?
No, I don't have any. I have a Facebook page, and it's also just JS Farms 2004. So, but I don't really have time to do a whole bunch of the online stuff. It's I kind of barely have time to do the YouTube things. So. But I just do the YouTube. I mainly just do the YouTube for learning purposes, for people that are wanting to get into the homesteading lifestyle, or the farming, or whichever route they want to go. I've seen you and J0 and our Half Acre Homestead, and I thought maybe I can do that too. So you guys were kind of the inspiration for me to start my channel anyway. So.
Well, it's nice
so people could just learn.
Yeah. Well, everybody go check out Stephanie over at JS Farms 2004. And if you'd like to support our channel, please go check out our Etsy store. I have our books about homesteading and raising goats, rabbits, chickens, poultry, and then a little book on farming. That really helps us out. And we'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Thanks, Stephanie. See ya.
Yep. See ya.